I'm Georgina. I'm a musician. I've got one song out on Spotify so far. My music name is Casty Sky.
So I'm Naomi and I have a very talkative guinea pig called Flop. So this video that we're doing today, this is our second collaboration, and I will link above the first collaboration that we did back in around Christmas time, where we discussed being chronically ill and disabled at Christmas. And today's video is for April's FND Awareness Month. So if people don't understand, FND stands for Functional Neurological Disorder, and basically the brain's messaging system in our bodies doesn't work, and because FND affects the whole brain, it results in very many different types of symptoms. And I think you, Georgina, in your How I Explain FND video, gave a really good analogy about cars.
Yeah, it was a paramedic that explained it that way to me, and I thought it was just so much more helpful than the computer one that doctors usually use. It's basically like the car's engine management system, which controls things in the car. When you press the brake pedal, the indicators might turn on, and that's pretty much what FND is. Just you want to do it, just gives different random symptoms that change person to person. Do you want to do your FND story?
Yeah, so for me, I was at university. I was doing a undergraduate master's in nursing, and I started to have some neurological symptoms. So I was a little bit off balance, and I just was forgetting things and other neurological symptoms. And I just put it down to being overworked and being tired, because I was kind of going to lectures and being on placement and things like that. And I kind of started to get really floppy. So you might notice that I have palsied wrists. And then so that kind of went on for a few months, and then I started to have kind of jerking movements. And then one night I had a full-blown tonic-clonic seizure, and they just dismissed it as a one-off episode, but then they started to get worse and worse and more frequent. And then obviously they investigated me for epilepsy and found that my seizures were non-epileptic. And as time's gone on, some symptoms have worsened, or some symptoms have changed. Some symptoms have kind of gone away and come back, and then some symptoms. So it's very kind of it's very difficult to map my FND symptoms because they're so chaotic. For a long time, my kind of neurological symptoms were just classed as medical unexplained symptoms. And I was getting pretty desperate. I had to leave university. I was really struggling to function. I was in and out of A&E all the time. In my kind of research into because FND was mentioned but wasn't really given as a definitive diagnosis. In my research, I was kind of coming across this guy called Professor Mark Edwards, who kind of leads a lot of FND research and information. And I kind of begged my GP, please, can you refer me to Professor Edwards? And I saw him on the 4th of July 2017, and he confirmed that I had FND and that my seizures were non-epileptic, and also that I had ME. And that was kind of a weight had been lifted, because finally, rather than just being medically unexplained, there was a reason for my symptoms. And he also picked up about my hypermobility and referred me on for specialist hypermobility services. Finally, I had somebody who A, believed me, and B, knew what was going wrong with me, and he did some tests and things like that and arranged for me to have a video telemetry just to double check that my seizures were non-epileptic. And since then, I've been keeping in touch with Professor Edwards, and he's been huge support.
I think it's incredible how different our experiences are. Like, how old were you when you first noticed symptoms?
So I started having symptoms in 2013, and I didn't get my official diagnosis until 2017. So I was 21 when I first started having symptoms.
Yeah, I just think it's amazing that like it affects people like not just in different ways but different ages. Because I was 15 when my FND started. Um, like I had a head injury and then like some emotional trauma, but I didn't. At first, it was put down to exam stress because I was in year 11 and like getting ready to take my GCSEs, and then like it was 2.5 years after I first had symptoms that I was finally diagnosed with FND, but I didn't have any like noticeable FND symptoms for 2 years. So we're in actually at Christmas in 2018, the whole of my left side went paralysed and I couldn't talk. So I was taken into A&E, and at first they thought I'd had a stroke because of the symptoms and like their typical stroke symptoms. And it was only a couple of days later after I had an MRI that they realised that I hadn't. And they brought up like they didn't say I had FND, but like looking back on it, the things that they were saying corresponded with like what we know about FND. They were saying about like the computer and stuff, but I wasn't diagnosed with FND then. It was 6 months later, kind of, I think, that I was in hospital and I went into anaphylaxis. And a couple of days later, I was sent home. And then when I was at home, I started twitching a lot and becoming unresponsive. So we called the paramedics out, and one of them noticed that my eyes were rolling into the back of my head. So they took me into A&E and they found out that I was having non-epileptic seizures. So it was then that I first met my neurologist. He's actually a local neurologist, but he's great. And I also have a specialist nurse who specialises in FND. And I think she's the one who actually officially diagnosed me with FND. And I still see her telephone at the moment, but every few months she'll phone me, see how I'm doing. Yeah.
I didn't even know FND nurses existed, because when I first started having seizures, locally I was seeing the local epilepsy nurse specialist. But as soon as my seizures were confirmed as non-epileptic, like I wasn't able to be under her because she only dealt with epileptic patients. So how does FND affect you now compared to when you first started having FND symptoms when you were 15?
At the moment, I'm actually doing like really well with my FND. I get some twitches, not like seizure twitches, just really random things. Like my arm will twitch or I'll say something. But other than that, I'm pretty unaffected at the moment. But when I was 15, um, I had really, really bad fatigue and hypersensitive skin and hearing. And I was off school for a few months and I only went in to take my exams and I never went back. it was my worst like time was 2018, 2019, when my fatigue was really bad, and that's when my paralysis started in my legs or down the side of my body, and my seizures started June 2019 too. How about you?
So my FND is still quite significant. When I walk very, very wobbly and wonky. If people didn't know I had FND, they would probably think that I have kind of drunk a few bottles of wine. I have regular different types of non-epileptic seizures. So I have tonic-clonic like seizures, which are kind of like classic ones that are usually kind of seen on television. I also have absence like seizures, so I'll just go daydreamy for a few moments, and I'll also have like myoclonics, which are just like jerky movements, and I have quite a lot of cognitive problems, so like my memory is really bad. It's just really unpredictable what kind of symptoms are going to have. Then it affects it has like a knock-on effects on you kind of like emotionally, because you get frustrated because of your symptoms, or you get frustrated because of the unpredictability, or you get frustrated because you can't speak when you want to kind of like let somebody know, or you get frustrated because you almost get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
It's really upsetting because there's so much that I want out of my life. I want to go back to education, and I want to go back to my voluntary work and get experience and kind of like build towards like, it's almost like I'm still grieving for my life, because I just feel like my life is on pause.
Yeah, and the emotions definitely don't help, like at all. Like feeling frustrated that this happens to you used to, like, when my seizures were really bad, I'd start dissociating because I just like couldn't believe that this is what my life had turned into. So yeah, the emotions are definitely not helpful, but then positive emotions can be beneficial in like realizing that it's not the end of like your life.
And I think as well, it's how misunderstood FND is. And like when you see professionals and you get, and I'm sure you can relate to this, sometimes you have some really good experiences where you have professionals that really want to understand and learn, and then you've got other professionals who just don't want to know, or have quite backwards ideas and kind of still see it as something that's psychosomatic, or kind of like that it's feigned. And I think kind of as well is the fact that there's like no test for FND. I mean, there are. I mean, like there is some research that on an fMRI scan, the FND does show up, but that's not routinely done in the UK.
No, it's more for research than diagnosis.
So the next bit on the itinerary is the highs and lows of living with FND.
That's tricky. Trying to find like some things I found are both highs and lows, like at the same time, which is really weird. But like when I had seizures, because they're like non-epileptic and dissociative, I felt more me and able to understand the world when I was having a seizure, which sounds really weird, but that's just like how I experienced it. So on the one hand, I'm having a seizure and like hurting myself because of my joints and like wiping myself out because it's so tiring. But then on the other hand, I was actually like understanding things better. It's very strange, but yeah.
I would say the highest for me is finding my true friends. And it's taken me years to find those people. But I feel like I'm in a good place now where I've got friends who are chronically ill disabled that are a positive influence on my life and that we can talk about normal stuff. But
Yeah, exactly.
equally, we can kind of turn to them when we're struggling with a particular symptom or something.
Yeah, like I basically just like left the chronic illness community on Instagram. Like I unfollowed about 700 people because I was like, I don't want to be here because um I don't know like what it is. It might just be my FND or something, but like being in that situation where everyone I follow is chronically ill and I'm constantly reading their stories, it just made me feel worse. And I was
Mm.
like, what if my FND picks this up and I have some other symptom that I I obviously don't want, and so I just left and I haven't really been active on it since.
Yeah, I had like a mass unfollowing, or every so often I'll periodically review people's accounts and whether I follow them. But then equally, I'll make an effort to find illustrators and envelope art and snail mail accounts to follow so that when I go on Instagram, I've got my friends who do make posts about their chronic health problems in a positive way, but equally I'm getting ideas for how I can decorate envelopes to the people that I write to. But I would say the low for me is how misunderstood FND is and how badly I've been treated by medical professionals, include both from health and social care, which is unfortunate because health and social care services are meant to be the people that are helping you. But for me, they're the people that have created the lowest aspect of living with a disability for me.
Yeah, I relate to well both of those points a lot. Like part of what we do is just like help people more people understand FND. Like that's what this video is for. For it to be medical professionals that say you're faking or you can't have this or that's not what a seizure looks like or something like that, it's really harmful and it's really hard to get over.
What are the things you would like people to understand about FND from watching this video?
But mostly it's that we have no control over it. Um, like similar to your experience with some of the seizures and medical professionals, I've had a doctor give me what I can only describe as a Vulcan death grip. Literally pinching my shoulder really hard, trying to snap me out of it. Like I can, most of the time when I was having seizures, I couldn't like interact with the world, but I could hear and I could feel things. And to know what people were saying about me while they thought I was unconscious is really damaging. So just knowing that, um, yeah, so just other people knowing that we can't control it is just like the big thing for me. When I was in hospital, I had a seizure that lasted almost 2 hours, and just it was like at night, and no one noticed for over an hour. And in my head, I was like, this can't be happening. Like, I can't just be left like this. And it was horrible knowing that all this time was going by and no one realized. And actually, sometimes I would start crying while I was having a seizure just because I knew what was going on around me. I just couldn't do anything about it.
That sounds awful. That you was in hospital where you're surrounded by care professionals and you're trapped inside your head having this seizure, wishing somebody would come and help you, and nobody's coming to you, and you can't physically press the buzzer or shout out like I'm having a seizure, and that just sounds like absolutely awful.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that I don't have them anymore. I mean, it's been a little over a year since I've had a seizure, but at the time, like, especially when they first started, when I was in hospital, I had like 2 seconds when I was aware that I was going to have a seizure, and all I did in that time was check my watch to know what time it started, because I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to write down on they have like fit charts. I wouldn't be able to write down like how long the seizure lasted or anything, and I knew that all this time was going by, and when I came out of it, I realised I was having a seizure for something like an hour and 46 minutes, and it was only in the last 15 minutes that people noticed. I mean, they were really nice when they noticed.
I would definitely agree that like one of the things I want people to know is that our condition is very real and very much like it's very similar to MS and Parkinson's, which people can like relate to. So our conditions are very real. We have no control over our symptoms. And to kind of like please believe us. And but also how like you can't put two people with FND together. And like I think this video is showing just how different FND is between two people.
Yeah, like even with the terminology that some people use as well, like if people watching this don't know, FND used to be called conversion disorder, which is
I hate that
that.
term.
Me too. That was classed as a mental illness, but actually FND is a neurological condition. Yeah, it's like it is neurological. It is a neurological condition, even though like your mental health can affect it. It is a neurological condition.
And I think like yes, like stress can be a trigger for people's FND symptoms, but equally stress can trigger, I don't know, a relapse in somebody with MS. Mental health plays a part in a lot of physical illnesses, but
Yeah.
quite often I found that with FND, the mental health part is like put the blame on the condition because of like the outdated understanding of the condition.
Yeah, definitely.
So the two questions that I got given on Instagram was um, how hard was it to get diagnosed?
Um, it was really hard. Um, it took 2.5 years for me, just partly because of my age at the time and how I was taking my exams and then going on to college. It was blamed on anxiety a lot, and it was only when I started experiencing those noticeable symptoms that I was diagnosed with FND.
So I think for me, the pinnacle moment for my diagnosis was when I got to see Professor Mark Edwards. Then the last question was, what care did we receive after diagnosis?
Um, Mainly, I have my specialist nurse, um, who I mentioned like right at the beginning of this. Um, she's amazing, and I had like little bits of physio and occupational therapy, but what I found most beneficial was having like my specialist nurse who knew about FND, and like she'd come and visit me when I was in hospital and stuff. How about
Yeah,
you?
so for me, locally I've had some bits bits of treatment. Like I've had like little bits of physiotherapy, and then hospital for 6 months. I had like specialist occupational therapy, and we did little bits of rehabilitation. But more than anything, it was learning to manage and live with my condition. Physiotherapy with my mobility. And then as well, I've had kind of like from occupational therapy, I've had like equipment provided to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did lots of stuff by myself, um, partly before I was diagnosed, but also partly afterwards. Like, I had to rent my own wheelchair and stuff like that just because I wasn't getting that from other people, like medical professionals.
And I think it's such a postcode lottery as to where you live. Like obviously like where you live, you've got this like I mean like I really want the number of your FND nurse. She sounds amazing. But obviously like where I live, there's no such thing. So it really is a bit of like NHS and social care postcode lottery, which
Yeah,
people say isn't a thing, but actually quite a lot of people who do have chronic illness and disabilities agree that it is a bit of a postcode lottery when it comes to health and social care.
definitely is. Because like, if you live in or near London, like most of the best medical professionals work in London hospitals. So obviously, if you live near them, you're going to see them more often than we would.
Yeah, because all my care is in London, both for like my kind of like FND, but like my other conditions like EDS and stuff, um, is in London. Like I don't have any local consultants. Like I've just got my GP. I think we've covered lots.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you want to add, or kind of do you think kind of we've talked about plenty to edit and put up on YouTube?
No, I think we've covered absolutely everything that we can. Like, yeah.
And hopefully by sharing our stories, it will help raise awareness of FND, what it's like to live with the condition, but also what it's like to be young and have a chronic illness slash disability. Yeah, thank you for doing this collaboration again with me.
Oh, thank you for
Um,
it.
I think it's what I really like is rather than me just talking about my FND, it's really helpful to have your story and your experience because
Yeah,
it kind of it kind of makes people more aware of how the conditions so different but the same, and yeah, it just kind of puts another perspective into the video.
yeah, and it's also a lot easier to bounce off each other rather than just talk straight to a camera.